Last month, I attended the 48th Toronto International Film Festival with my friend Avalon. We watched a total of 20 movies, and since most of them haven't come out yet, I thought I'd give you a rundown on all the films I've seen and whether they're worth your time. So here are 20 TIFF movies reviewed in under 20 minutes. Hayao Miyazaki's The Boy and the Heron is the director's latest and no longer his last film. It tells the story of a young boy, Mahito, who becomes hardened after the loss of his mother to a devastating fire during the Second World War. Following the tragedy, Mahito and his father move to Japan's countryside to live with his new family. As he embraces his isolation there, he comes upon a talking heron who seems to take an interest in Mahito, claiming his mother is still alive. From there, Mahito is thrown into a fantastical world filled with all the things we have come to love from Studio Ghibli films. It's probably safe to say that this movie, while maybe not Miyazaki's best, is a summation of everything he's made before this. First of all, the animation is stunning. There are moments in this film where the plot slows down and we embrace the fever dream that is the beautiful art style and Joe Hisaishi's wonderful score. The pacing never felt too slow, as every frame was a beautiful painting to linger on and behold. And like so many other Studio Ghibli films, childlike wonder and imagination take the primary role, offering a deeper message on how children, as our successors, hold the key to forging a better path despite facing the trauma and chaos caused by the current generation. A visually and emotionally stunning story about parenthood, exploration, and magic, this movie can be enjoyed and appreciated by anyone at any age, so this is a must-watch. Patricia Arquette's Gonzo Girl is the boyhood actress's directorial debut starring Camilla Morrone. Based on the semi-autobiographical novel of the same name, it follows Ali Russo, an aspiring writer who takes on the job of being a writing assistant to legendary author and journalist Willem Dafoe's Walker Reed. This film is interesting in that it is simultaneously based on a novel, but also not. At the screening, Arquette cited that this was a film about Hunter S. Thompson, the so-called father of gonzo journalism. However, the film takes on a new life and separates itself from the biographical nature of its source. This results in a confused audience questioning the meaning of the based on true events message that flickers before the film begins. The film explores the experience of a woman who gets wrapped in the downward spiral of a man's life while she's in the process of trying to bring up her own. However, it feels like the writers also got caught in Walker's downward spiral, as they were more interested in his story than his assistant's. Apart from the flimsy script, the film is mostly carried by its performances, especially Dafoe's, so if you're a fan of Willem going a little kooky, this one might be worth watching, but for me it was a bit of a waste of time. Anna Kendrick's Woman of the Hour is another directorial debut from an actor. The movie tells the real-life story of serial killer Rodney Alcala and his appearance on a dating show in the 70s. And this movie is pretty good. It has some great performances from Anna Kendrick, Tony Hale, and Autumn Best. There are some really engaging scenes where the audience was having fun and laughing together, and scenes when the audience was dead silent with fear and anxiety. And yet tonally it was well balanced, especially considering the dark subject matter. The movie also offers a nice message on gender dynamics. It wasn't the most subtle execution, but it wasn't so in your face either. Since I had fun with it and it was a great watch, I would say you should watch this movie. Wim Wenders' Perfect Days is a character study of Hirayama, the cleaner of Tokyo's public toilet project. For context, this is a project where 17 public restrooms all around Tokyo were redesigned to be architectural marvels. In this quiet and peaceful film, the German filmmaker shows the audience the beauty and peace in the groove of everyday life. There is a simple pleasure in watching Hirayama, played by the amazing Koji Yakusho, start his day by watering his plants, grabbing a coffee, and driving around Tokyo to clean toilets while listening to vintage cassette tapes. And as we settle into his routine and take in the satisfaction of a good day's work with Hirayama, we also start to see the small moments that break up his structured life, like his niece visiting or a coworker asking for some extra cash for his girlfriend. But these moments do not disrupt the rhythm we've grown accustomed to, instead they enhance it, making these fleeting moments where we see Hirayama behind the routine truly so special. Not only is this movie a meditation on routine and the quiet beauty of day-to-day life, but it also offers a commentary on growing older and what that can mean for the life you've built for yourself. Perfect Days balances Hirayama's simple routine with the challenges of a changing and growing world around him. This movie felt like a warm hug, and I think it's a must-watch, especially considering this is Japan's official entry for next year's Oscars. Nicholas Larsson's Mother Couch is an adaptation of a Swedish novel of a similar name. The film follows three estranged siblings starring Ewan McGregor, Rhys Ifans, and Laura Flynn Boyle, who must come together when their mother refuses to get off a couch in the middle of a furniture store. McGregor plays David, the protagonist of our journey, and the only one of his siblings who seems to shoulder the family responsibilities and actually care about his mother. And as the movie continues, we see David beginning to crumble under the pressure that is familial expectations. Now, while the premise sounds interesting, the story didn't really do much for me, as the characters besides David rarely showed any depth. However, Larsson's directorial style is still interesting, and the actors are putting in the effort to make the movie watchable and entertaining to an extent. Christopher Borgle's Dream Scenario is A24's next strange hit, as Nicolas Cage plays Paul Matthews, a regular Joe who turns into an overnight celebrity when he starts appearing in everyone's dreams. While this fame gives Paul the attention and admiration he has always craved, the film starts to show the downside to such widespread groupthink. The core theme of the film seems to be about how fame and cancel culture can completely ruin a person's life, which was interesting in itself. When our protagonist posts a terrible apology video and is treated as a cancelled celebrity by both the general public and a brand agency, it makes it difficult to empathize with him, even when all Paul's done is just appear in a bunch of dreams. So while I'm not sure if the movie lands its message that well, it's still a fun watch, especially for fans of A24, and Nicolas Cage is the perfect casting for this kind of character. You should definitely give this movie a shot, it's worth a watch. Craig Gillespie's Dumb Money documents the real-life GameStop Wall Street scandal event that occurred during the pandemic. It stars Paul Dano as Keith Gill, a small-time streamer, an investor who believes the GameStop stock is undervalued, and Seth Rogen as Gabe Plotkin, a big-time hedge fund manager who believes the stock is overvalued. This tension creates a push-pull dynamic that ropes in people from all around the country, including GameStop employees, nurses, students, and financial investors. This movie, like The Social Network and Moneyball, is engaging and thrilling, and it makes us feel all the highs and lows that GameStop went through during that era. It's a captivating story about how the public can still take control and fight back against the rich and powerful in a world that rarely allows it. It empowers the little guy and is a feel-good movie about screwing over the people whose job it is to screw us over. It's a fun movie that I think anyone can like, so I'm gonna put this under must watch. Christy Hall's Daddio is a two-person show about a younger modern woman, played by Dakota Johnson, who takes a cab ride from JFK Airport to her apartment in New York City. During the ride, she engages in a lengthy and philosophical conversation with the old-fashioned cab driver, played by Sean Penn. And that's it. The movie only has 2 actors and 1 set, and it is not so bad. The script is tight, and the performances are pretty good. 1 minute you're laughing because Sean Penn said some conservative mumbo-jumbo, and the next you're crying because you feel the pain and emotion he hides behind his rough exterior. In the moment, I really enjoyed the movie, but since it came out, I haven't really thought about it, so I wish it showed just a little bit more depth and insight. But I still appreciate how Christy Hall wants to show us that in a world where conversations between people of different mindsets are few and far between, it's really important to connect with strangers, so I'm gonna put this one under watchable. Hirokazu Koreeda's Monster is a powerful tale about love, bullying, and the struggle for understanding. It's difficult to discuss this movie's plot without spoiling it, as the greater story is hidden from the audience and we are only clued in on the bird's eye view as the movie progresses. But the film uses different perspectives to tell only fractions of the plot at a time, so the audience can slowly come to terms with the greater story at hand. Telling us the story through different perspectives takes the audience on a journey of understanding. It's easy to deem the things we're uncomfortable with as monster, but only when we take the time to hear everything out and see the bigger picture can we really appreciate the beauty within. And that's kind of how I felt when watching this movie. As an audience member, it's so easy to make assumptions and cast judgment when you're only given half the story. It's the first time I've seen a film by Koreeda, and this one film inspired me to check out his whole filmography, so this is a must watch. Richard Linklater's Hitman is inspired by real events where Gary Johnson, played by Glenn Powell, acts as an undercover hitman who entraps criminals looking to hire for murder. Things are successful for Gary until he falls in love with one of his would-be clients, Madison, played by Adria Arjona. What comes next is a steamy true crime story about sex, murder, and mystery. And I'm not lying when I say this movie is steamy. Glenn Powell and Adria Arjona are maximizing their charisma. It's oozing out of them in every scene they have together. And the movie is just really fun. It's got a nice playful tone to it, and some scenes would have you roaring and clapping, just like the audience at my screening was. So I would say this is a must-watch movie. Finn Wolfhard and Billy Brick's Hell of a Summer is a slasher comedy set in a summer camp. The plot of this film, like most slashers, is kind of irrelevant, but it follows Jason, played by Fred Hetchinger, who is an older and seasoned camp counselor who can't seem to let camp go. There's nothing overtly offensive about this movie, but it also doesn't dare tread any new ground. It plays itself more like a comedy than it does like a horror film, so it's a perfect kind of in-between movie snack during a horror marathon. But there are some really funny jokes in here. For a directorial debut from two young actors, it's not bad. I would say it's watchable. Ryosuke Hamaguchi's Evil Does Not Exist depicts the slow yet unavoidable conflict between man and nature. When some urban developers plan on opening up a glamping site on the grounds of a small village in Japan, they must deal with the tenacity of the villagers living on that land. And to be honest, after watching this movie, I felt like I kind of wasted my time. I really love driving my car, but this movie did not hit for me. But after leaving the theater, I just could not stop thinking about this movie. It's very captivating, to say the least. Between important scenes, Hamaguchi indulges in serene and peaceful tracking shots of nature and trees, accompanied by the beautiful score by Eiko Ishibashi. Only when our characters return back to the screen do these scenes get truly disrupted, as the music cuts harshly as if the mere presence of humanity takes away the beauty of nature. This filmmaking technique complements the themes of the movie well too, as one of the villagers, Takumi, played by Hitoshi Omika, quietly fights the developers planning on harming the land. On the other hand, the film also gives depth and personality to each character, making even the antagonist of the film pretty empathetic. So despite communicating the message that humanity is a plague on nature, it also understands that humanity comes from nature too. It's a slow one and it might take some time to get used to, but it's worth your time for sure. Taika Waititi's Next Goal Wins is the director's newest, based on a true story comedy about how the American Samoa football team attempted to make a comeback after a 31-0 loss in 2001. It's an underdog tale of when Dutch-American coach Thomas Rongen, played by Michael Fassbender, tries to bring this team filled with bad players to glory. This movie, while one of my most anticipated movies of TIFF this year, was a bit of a disappointment. The classic Taika Waititi humor gets pretty old pretty quickly, and the arc of our protagonist goes through just feels kind of half-baked. I almost couldn't believe he had changed that much from the beginning of the movie. There's a scene where he dead names one of the trans players on his team, and while it is played as a bad thing, it's also just brushed off later. However, Ted Lasso Light is not all bad, it's inspirational and touching at times, despite it not fully landing in its execution. So it's watchable. Chloe DeMont's Fair Play stars Phoebe Dynevor and Alden Ehrenreich as hedge fund analysts by day and secret lovers by night. However, when Emily, played by Dynevor, gets a promotion at work, their romance is tested and strained. Now, creating a story with reverse traditional gender dynamics mixed in with tricky workplace politics is a challenging feat, but one that DeMont does pretty good in. Every scene is filled with stress and anxiety and tension, and when it feels like the audience just can't take it anymore, neither can the characters as they reach the climax of their story. The actors are also doing a pretty good job, especially Ehrenreich, who delivers a performance where you can tell exactly what his character Luke is thinking at every fork in the road, despite his lines saying otherwise. However, the film also doesn't reach the full potential it could have reached. I was imagining a film where we don't know who to root for as our characters play in this corporate tug of war, but there is very clearly a protagonist and an antagonist from the beginning. So I'd say this movie is watchable. Christos Niku's Fingernails is a dystopian future story where technology decides if a relationship is deemed to have true love. Jessie Buckley plays Anna, a girl who is caught in a love triangle between her current long-term boyfriend Ryan, played by Jeremy Allen White, and her new coworker Amir, played by Riz Ahmed. Already in a relationship deemed to have true love, Anna is curiously discovering feelings for someone else, ultimately challenging an algorithm's definition of love. Unfortunately, the movie failed to deliver on its Black Mirror-style premise, as it fails to offer any sort of meaningful message about why love cannot be understood by a machine. Instead, the movie is more interested in its romance aspect, but it ultimately fails to satisfy that side too, as I never truly felt anyone was in love with the other. However, the cast is so fun to watch, and Jeremy Allen White is in it, so it's definitely watchable. David Yates' Pain Hustlers is a true story-turned-movie about how Liza Drake, a single mom and dancer played by Emily Blunt, managed to sell vast amounts of an addicting painkiller to doctors, ultimately kickstarting the opioid epidemic in the 90s. And while the story is interesting and should be told, the movie's tone is all over the place. For 80% of the runtime, the film made me feel reward and glory when Liza is selling her drugs, and only in the last 20 to 30 minutes of the film do we really feel the devastating effect of everything. For a movie detailing an epidemic where over 500,000 people died, the stakes never felt dire, and it seemed like the plot was more interested in reaping the reward than facing the consequences. I might be a bit biased because I watched Dopesick a year ago, and that show presented the horrifying nature of the epidemic a lot more transparently. My friend Avalon enjoyed learning more about the epidemic through Emily Blunt and Chris Evans, but after watching Dopesick, Pain Hustlers was a waste of time for me. Jason Yu's Sleep is about a married couple who undergo horrific events when the husband develops a so-called sleeping disorder that disturbs the couple in horrifying spells every night. From sleep talking to sleepwalking to sleep eating, the problem only gets worse and worse, creating an aroma of paranoia and fear. The film is an intense slow burn and a wild ride from start to finish as we get increasingly paranoid and delusional along with the wife, who has to deal with the nightmare events occurring. My experience with this film was also quite fun and thrilling, as it was my first time being at a Midnight Madness showing at TIFF, which is a completely different crowd from the normal showings. The film is a great low-budget horror film with some pretty good acting, so I'd say it's watchable. Carlos Lopez Estrada and Zach Manuel's Long Live Montero is a musical documentary that takes a look at Lil Nas X's tour as the artist comes to terms with his success, fame, and reach. I didn't go to any of his shows, but based on the documentary, they looked amazing. The doc offers a behind-the-scenes look at the dancers, the songs, and Montero's dreams and ambitions. The documentary could have also been structured a bit better chronologically and could have offered a more insightful look into what it means to be a gay black artist in an industry that's rooting against you, but it still stands on its own feet as a great concert documentary for Lil Nas X's first tour. If you're a fan of Lil Nas X and you went to one of his shows, I would say this is a should watch, but I'm not the biggest fan of concert documentaries, so I would just say this movie is watchable. Chris Pine's Poolman is the actor's first directorial attempt, and he stars as our protagonist Darren, a poolman who stumbles upon a city conspiracy in the heart of Los Angeles. And while the movie premise sounds interesting, it's unsurprisingly really messy and poorly executed. It was hard to keep my eyes open at times. Chris Pine's attempt at a noir satire just doesn't really work, as the characters are so uninteresting and the story moves at a sluggish pace. The best part of this movie is Danny DeVito and Annette Bening, since it feels like they just showed up to have fun. So despite their delightful performances, I just felt like I really wasted my time with this movie, much more so than any of the other TIFF films. Azazel Jacobs' His Three Daughters is a film about three estranged sisters played by Carrie Coon, Elizabeth Olsen, and Natasha Lyonne, who must come together as they come to terms with the decline of their father's health. Jacobs' film is a beautiful story about dealing with grief in a dysfunctional family. The actors are presenting all their emotions from grief to anger to joy so well that it's hard to remember their acting. Each of the main three protagonists play their roles in the family dynamic perfectly, with Carrie Coon shining as the oldest sibling and Natasha Lyonne shining as the estranged middle child. There are also some really clever framing techniques used, like how the shot keeps siblings in the same frame when they're on the same page, and the shot separates the siblings who are in a conflict. Ending my TIFF festival with this movie, especially after Poolman, was a great surprise, as I didn't have many expectations going in, yet I left the theater practically crying. I cannot wait to watch this movie again and relive all the grief and emotions that this made me feel the first time. It's a must-watch for sure. And that's 20 TIFF movies, summed up and reviewed in under 20 minutes. I put the movies into a tier list so you have a sense of what movies are worth your time and what movies aren't. Please remember this is just my opinion, but let me know in the comments if you like this video or if you have any ideas for future videos. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks.